welcome to How to Create Great Content Without Exploding Your Team. I'm Hugh Taylor, and I'm going to be presenting this to you over the next 20 or 30 minutes, and we'll look forward to hearing your questions at the end. Let's start by asking, why are we creating content? This is a question that may not get asked enough, and I spend my life creating content. I work on white papers and case studies and articles and books and web copy and all kinds of other written content, working with mostly large technology companies, but also startups. And it's a question worth asking. Why are we doing this? Why should we create a white paper? Usually we're doing it for lead generation, to get people interested in our product, to give them something to sign up for and give us their email so we can get in touch with them. We do it for lead nurturing, to follow up on people in the sales funnel, send them something interesting to read to keep them interested. We create content as sales air cover, give salespeople something to talk about, something to give to prospects, a way to build a relationship, start conversations, and at the same time, hopefully we're doing it to create thought leadership. So this is why we're going into content. Now the question that comes up sometimes is, why can it be so hard to create good content? This is unfortunately, and I have seen this a lot, it can be difficult to create good content. And it's often an issue of team cohesion. It's an issue of bringing people together. And the reality is that although content is usually sponsored by one person, there's one person on a team whose job is to get the content written or write it, the content almost always represents multiple opinions. There's different points of view on a product team, and for the sake of argument, we'll define a product team as consisting of marketing people, product managers, product marketers, and the engineering team that actually builds a product. All these individuals have a voice in content, or may have a voice in content, and it's also an interesting question. Who you asking for their opinion, and do you really want it? Do you need it? And or are you ignoring people and finding out that they have opinions later, which is also a problem. But the general challenge is you usually have multiple opinions and only one piece of content. When you're finished with the process, you will have a piece of content. Now you might be creating multiple pieces of content, but you'll have the same problem multiple times. There's only usually one deliverable, one white paper, one solution brief, and so forth, even though there may be more than one opinion amongst the team about how you should be communicating about that product. So content usually means consensus, usually means achieving consensus amongst team members, or it can mean the victory of one point of view over another, which is not, neither one of these is good or bad. Sometimes people think, oh, victory of one point of view over another, that means someone's winning and someone's losing. Well, maybe the person who's winning is the right person, it has the right opinion, and the person who's losing has the wrong opinion. Consensus might mean things are more harmonious, but also might mean you're diluting your message. So there is no one right way to do it, but the challenge is to bring people together to agree on what needs to be done. And I like to tell an anecdote, it's a true story unfortunately, of a notorious episode in ancient history, which is the story of the Roman conquest of the city of Jerusalem, which is shown in this picture here. This is a photo of the Arch of Titus in Rome, which shows the Roman soldiers carrying off the treasure of the ancient temple in Jerusalem, the temple of the Israelites. As you can see, there's a menorah. They're carrying off a large menorah in the middle there. And what's fascinating about this story, this is a true story, it was written about by Roman historians at the time, is that when the Roman army surrounded Jerusalem and they besieged it for many years and They finally broke through the wall to conquer the city. And when they broke through the wall, they found that the Israelites were fighting a civil war amongst themselves. The Romans were sort of speechless. They came into the city. They were expecting to fight an army, and instead they found that they were observing a war going on between different factions of the Israelites. And of course, unfortunately, the Israelites lost and the Romans conquered the city. But there's a lesson to be learned, I think, for content creation in this story, which is that if your team is having a civil war, you're going to be less competitive than you could be, and your company is usually, most companies, if they're successful, are under siege. They've got the enemy, the competitors, battering at their walls, wanting to come in, and so if you're busy having a civil war inside the city, you're not going to mount as good a defense as you might want to. So we can learn from the experience of Titus, and we can not fall into that trap. So there's a couple, just to get specific, what we mean about conflict. There might be disagreement on the team about what the value proposition is for a product. And, hopefully this is something that's worked out relatively early in the process of creating a product or solution. But as I've seen in certain situations, oftentimes content will get created around something that's really new, or a new solution that's put together based on existing products, or something that hasn't really been thought about that much before. So you might be looking at redefining a value proposition, or the market conditions can change. So for example, if you were marketing an app that did mapping or something, and then Google Maps came out and you were competing against them all of a sudden, then you might have to change your value proposition to differentiate away from Google Maps. So again, you have this consensus problem or lack of coherent message. And an example might be, and this is tricky, especially in a large company context, is to separate a brand message from a product message. So for example, this is hypothetical and simplified, obviously, is, the brand message might be something like, we're your cloud partner, something kind of high level. We're your partner for the cloud, which is fine. But if your job is to market, let's say, cloud management tools, you need to really be talking about cloud management tools, not your cloud partner. And the whole idea of being your cloud partner might not really fit into the specific audience discussion that you want to be having about your product. And one problem that I've seen a number of times is that a branding sort of mandate comes down from above, that you shall message this product around the brand message. This is done with very good intentions and a lot of good thinking, meaning that the company wants to have a consistent point of reference on the brand and the message. However, it can compromise a specific piece of content quite badly. So what has to happen is you have to build an agreement around how you're going to incorporate these two ideas. And you may have to relegate the brand message into some sort of, higher level introduction to the content, or some technique that keeps the message there but doesn't let it confuse the message of what you're actually trying to say. Because if you're trying to say that you have a cloud management tool set that enables efficiency in cloud administration, that's the message you want to hit. Being your cloud partner is nice, but the audience isn't going to really pay that much attention to it. And what I've also found, and falls into the category of things that sometimes clients don't want to hear, is that different personas in the buying process may not react well to the higher level message. And I think a lot of us know what this means, but it's if you're especially people who are in sort of practical engineering and administrative type of roles in the buying side often really don't like and have a lot of suspicion for fluff. And the fluffier and more visionary the message is, the more they dislike it and the more suspicious they are of it. And it's an issue to be dealt with, because if you are marketing to chief technology officers, the aspirational visionary message may resonate with them. If you're marketing to software developers or network administrators, they may be really wired in the opposite direction and may resent the intrusion of this kind of stuff into their stream of consciousness. So your content strategy may backfire if you can't balance the messaging. So it's not an easy picture sometimes, and I don't mean to be negative, but the concept of the webinar was to talk about challenges that can come in the way of creating great content. And I want to say, you can create great content. It can be done. I do it all the time with great teams. If I can pat myself on the back, it can be done, but it can be challenging. And the downside is you can end up wasting time. At the very least, content difficulties can be very time consuming. Getting people to look at multiple drafts of things and discussing it endlessly can be a waste of time. You can end up with content that's not used, or content that is low impact. That's always disappointing too, when you put time and money into content and it doesn't have the effect that you want it to have. People aren't reading it or responding to it or creating the dialogues that you want to have. So let's talk about how to avoid conflict. The best way to avoid it is to anticipate it and prevent it. Now, of course, that's easier said than done, but I think even just having an awareness that you can have conflict is already a step in the right direction. Now, maybe you won't. And we all know there's plenty of teams that work well, or they've ironed out their messaging issues, or they're managed in such a way that content can just get done and nobody is bothered by it. But a lot of situations don't work that well. So the first step is to anticipate it and think through what potential conflicts might be. Then there are a couple of specific steps that I recommend that a team go through to make sure that content is produced in an effective way. And this is something that will, in my view, in my experience, save time later, although it represents something of an investment of time up front. The first aspect is to work with message frameworks, and I'll show some examples in a little while. Message frameworks are it's a way to think through the messaging for a whole campaign. Really, it can be used for a whole marketing campaign, but specifically can be used for content creation or to guide content creation and work across multiple pieces of content. But the message framework gives everybody in the team a way to participate in putting down the messaging that they want to articulate for content creation. Then it's really helpful to plan for reviews and approvals in advance. And as someone who used to work at Microsoft, I was trained very thoroughly in this, and I believe in it. It can be a little bit bureaucratic in some ways, but it's really worth it to go through and really make sure you know who's going to be looking at content, who's going to be approving it. Give people a heads up to expect a draft of it coming, so they don't get surprised by some 20-page thing landing in their inbox with a request to read it. And then I think also you really have to seek and destroy toxic internal conflicts. Now, hopefully your team doesn't have toxic internal conflicts, but there can be disagreements, and there's a tendency for them to become contentious. So if you can figure out what they are and address them up front, you'll be happy later. So let's talk about anticipate and prevent. And this is one of these exercises that is sort of like it's easy, and it should be easy, but sometimes it isn't easy. So check your gut. You probably already know what the problem is going to be, because if nothing else, just think about the personalities on your team. Are there personalities that are in conflict? Because sometimes conflict in content is just personality conflict projected onto the project of creating a piece of content. So if you can get out ahead of that, you'll save everybody some headaches. But one example that I've come across a few times is a difference of opinion and a difference of perspective between engineering-oriented people on a team and marketing-oriented people. And the example that I'm going to use is marketing a content for developer tools. So writing a white paper about developer tools. So developer tools are a big business that are fairly low down in the stack, meaning they're used by developers. They're often purchased sort of at discretion of small developer teams. They're not usually a big enterprise purchase, but sometimes they are. And you may have a disagreement, amongst who's really the buyer, and are they buying this developer tool product for really specific technical reasons, or is there sort of a developer team management or an IT department level thinking that goes into buying developer tools? And I went through this, so that's why I'm using an example with a client where there was a pretty long and difficult argument between two factions on my client's team, between people who thought that software developers buy tools on their own. They don't really ask for permission. They buy what they want. They use what they want. Versus people who felt that IT departments bought developer tools and mandated that certain tools be used. And of course, both things are true. And there's a lot of variation within companies on how they use developer tools. But again, there's really going to be just one white paper. So what are you going to say about it? And in this particular case, we went through a lot of discussions and rewriting and everything. So question is, would a 30-minute interview, a 30-minute meeting up front save a lot of aggravation later? I think that this team could have, if they had anticipated this problem, might have saved quite a few hours of work and a lot of aggravation if they had sort of hashed it out in advance and just come to a consensus, or at least selected a point of view before they got into the process. So I like to say, collaborate, check in, and breathe. Okay, it can be that simple. You're all on the same team, right? You want the same thing. Now let me throw a curveball out at you, which is the challenge of working with a subject matter expert. Many content projects involve bringing in a SME, a SME, to talk about the product or the solution and really give technical depth and in-depth insight into why this product or tool is going to be a good fit with a customer and what the value proposition is, which is a really good idea to do, and bring these people in and interview them. The problem is often they have a completely separate idea of what the value proposition is. And one example that can come up is that sometimes the SME is someone who's actually out in the field, like a sales engineer or a evangelist, and that person may have an actually very correct and practical view of how this product is being used, and that may not mesh well with the more ivory tower or sort of pure idea of how this product should be marketed. And so you may actually have, and I've been through this conversation with a SME where he or she just absolutely shreds the suggested value proposition, says that's not why people buy this product, you're wrong, the competition is better than us in this or that area. And as the writer, I'll take a lot of notes, and it's ultra fascinating to hear, but it's very confusing, and it slows the process down. And you can often end up with a SME interview that doesn't contribute a lot of valuable material. And also, SMEs tend to be really busy. You can grab them for half an hour next Thursday, and you better get it, and then they're gone. And and so the suggestion I have is to bring the SME into the content process early. And this can be as simple as sending an email and getting an answer. It doesn't have to be a whole elaborate thing, but just talk to this person in advance. Say, we're doing a white paper on developer tools. We want to talk to you about XYZ. This is what our approach is. This is our value proposition. Do you agree with this? Do you have any comments or input now? Let's talk about it now. But instead of when we get on the phone with you and here that you think we're completely out of our minds. So that's my thought on subject matter experts. Now let's talk about message framework. Now what I have on this slide is a generic message framework, and then I'm going to show an example of one that's been at least partially filled out. But the message framework, they all sort of look like this. This is one that I have used at Microsoft, and we've used it at some other agencies I work with. It's an exercise that unfortunately can be a little bit tedious to go through this, but it is really, really helpful to create alignment. And the idea is that everybody has to see, contribute, and sign off on this message framework. And this builds consensus. Or at the very least, it brings conflicts to light and you can resolve them. So the basic framework asks everybody in the team to identify what they think the customer pain points are, the product's value proposition, and the basic message. Then you have what are called, what a lot of people call pillars. And these are themes that you develop in the content or in the campaign. And each pillar is supported by supporting points, and those supporting points are validated by proof points. This is a suggested way to break these things down, because what can happen is you can get into a discussion with a team where people start dumping ideas and like, oh, we're 10% faster, we're 20% cheaper, and we're this and we're that. And you end up with sort of a laundry list of, benefits or features. The challenge is to articulate them in a coherent way that supports your value proposition and in a way that's organized. And so if you imagine sort of if you think of a piece of content as like a conversation with your client, but you're not there, what are you saying to this client? You want to say, we hear you have pain, we have a solution, this is how we like to talk about it, and it'll help you for 3 reasons. Reason number 1, and we have supporting points and proof of these points. Theme number 2, with supporting points and proof, and so forth. So it organizes the thinking around the value proposition. So looking at just coming back to the developer tool hypothetical simplified case, that let's just say, for example, that we know that the pain point in this case is that application development can be slow because of intra-team communications. People are not being able to understand what other people are doing on the team, so things slow down. Our value proposition is we have development tools that enable streamlined development team communications for faster development times. Okay, that's the value proposition, and I'm just using this as an example. I'm not saying that this is a good value proposition or even all that realistic. I'm just trying to put some flesh onto the skeleton here to show you how this flows. The message might be something like focus on coding, not email, ship your app faster. Okay, so that's the high level. Now, how do we support that point? Because it's easy to say focus on coding, not email. At that point, your customer is probably interested but has no idea what you're talking about. So this is where your pillars come in. So we have 3 pillars. And after intense team discussion, we've come up with 3 pillars. Pillar number 1 is better development management. Pillar number 2 is better development financials. And pillar number 3 is better development team productivity. Now, as you can see, they're all sort of the same thing. They're all about doing software development better, faster, more economically, more productively. But we're breaking down these 3 themes so that we have a way to talk about individual benefits and features of the product. So, for example, under better development management, one of our supporting points, you can track individual developer work. That's the supporting point. The proof point of that is that we have a management console. So the management console is like the proof that we help you track individual developer work. Management console is not really a supporting point, and it's a distinction worth making that stray features and statistical benefits, whatever, need to be put into context. Similarly, if you're talking about better development financials, our supporting point is lower development budgets. And then I'm just making this up. We have an example of a client that saved 25% with this tools. Same thing with time to market, they reduce time to market, or better productivity. We have a case example. So we have examples, specifics to support the argument. So this is the message framework. So if you go through this process, and it can be, difficult or a little boring sometimes, you will come out at the very least with everybody feeling like they've been consulted, which is very important. But also you'll come out with some kind of consensus. Or if people have opposition, they can register it. But one thing to take away from this is with these pillars, you can fold in multiple points of view. You can do, a pillar for it tastes great and a pillar for it's less filling. Right? You can open up a bigger tent and bring in different ideas, assuming they're not completely in contradiction to each other. But it's a way to weave together potentially contentious points of view. So we're going to make this work. Okay, you can be happy. We'll talk for a minute about reviews and approvals. It's important to name names, set dates, and manage expectations. At Microsoft, we had a thing called the ORP. Ask any softie what the ORP is, and they'll probably smile. The ORP stands for Owner, Approver, Reviewer, Participant. The 4 groups of people you have on a content team. And the owner is probably the person, the product manager who's responsible for the content. The approver might be the same person, but it's often maybe that person's boss or someone at a higher level who has to sign off. Reviewers, and there may be multiple reviewers, are people who get to read the paper and have input into it. And it's a really good practice to tell these people, ask them if they can play this role, tell them you need to play this role, tell them when it's going to be, tell them what's involved. And participants are everybody else. It could be your subject matter experts, other people involved. But this way, you can keep people organized and avoid surprises. And you have to realize, of course, in a big organization, there might be dozens of projects like this going on. So people may really appreciate being told, look, I need you to review a paper in a month because they've got 10 other papers coming around. So they want to know, okay, I better set aside the afternoon on November 15th because that's when this project's time is. And some other project's going to be November 17th and so forth. So you want to go for a team win, and you can get there for sure. This is a way just put it together. I think of it as a 3-step process: prepare, align, execute. Okay, prepare, team consensus on the content purpose, do the message framework, align everybody, get your SMEs in alignment, review, approval, assignment, and then execute, follow through. Be flexible and discuss, but follow through on what you said, and I think you'll find the process goes more smoothly. So thank you so much for being with me today. Hope you found this helpful and be on your way to creating great content without exploding your team. We look forward to hearing from you. I'm Hugh at HughTaylor.com, www.hughtaylor.com. Look forward to being in touch. Thank you so much.